Hello everybody, thank you very much for coming. We'll start with apologies, I think. Got a list of apologies, is there anything to add? No? No, okay. Minutes of the previous meeting. If we just go through for accuracy and take any actions as they arise if they're not on the agenda. Okay, because there doesn't seem to the action log is missing. Or is it at the end? Right, it's just not on the agenda. Okay, so item page 1. Any comments? Page 2. Page 3. I've got a question on page 3 on action 9, which was about the 101 system. Is there any timing on that?
I understood that Jane Larkin was preparing a report that was going to Mr Madgwick within the next couple of weeks, is my understanding in terms of the timings, and then once that's been presented it would go through the normal governance processes at command team and through to EG, etc.
Yeah, we'll share it as soon as we get it. We'll share it. I mean, then we need to have a quick discussion through the process, don't we? But as soon as I get it, you'll have it.
Yeah, that would be helpful because wherever I go, I get questions about that, frequent questions. So it really does need some focus on it. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. So on the action log, then page 3. Any comments on that? Just on the 120, the APCC are still in the middle of reviewing their standing groups. So there were proposals for new ones were discussed at the last meeting. So they will be forthcoming. So once we know who has on the lead for that, then we can follow up. I suspect it probably will still be Martin Underhill, but we don't know that for the moment. Page 4. I've just got one comment on 122. Yeah, which was that I've now handed that report to the new policing minister last week on Thursday night. That's the NRCN report from Plymouth University. And he has assured me he will read it.
Just checking on that one, Chair. There was no other... The beginning of that action didn't seem to make sense to me. I wasn't at the meeting where it was discussed, but it was something to do with the tender process, but I think that was all resolved. So can that close then?
Yes. There was one sort of general comment that came out of that conversation with the Minister, and that they are now proactively looking at the funding formula again. So now that I think we've got a new Minister in place, that's something that he's picked up. So whereas I think there had been a view that that might have been pushed out a bit further, but it is back on the table, I think. Tim, just on 123, question for you. Yeah. IS Information Security have been doing a review, haven't they, on that?
Yes.
Do we know when that is due and what the next steps are on it?
As soon as I get the review, and I'll ask her if you put it down to me, I'll get the review back and we can discuss it at EG first, and then we can report it back formally here. But I'll ask Sarah Wincham, who hasn't actually, unfortunately, been at work the last couple of weeks because of a personal issue. I'll chase her, and then we'll get a report back here.
Okay, all right. Because I also did notice, and I didn't look at the detail of it, but there was a national bid through the Police Reform and Transformation Board that included eSINs. So perhaps it might be worth looking at that national bid and see what it was for and whether that might assist us.
Yeah.
Because I think it was approved.
Okay, if it was, then we'll
Yeah.
pick that up.
Okay. Page 5.
On, well, 124 crosses over. I'll catch up with Amanda on the Royal Crime Task Force analyst to see if they're in a position to do that yet. I suspect they might be by now, so I'll catch up with her on that.
Okay. Will, I've got a question also on 136. If you remember, we've had some correspondence come into the OPCC recently, and I just wonder whether that's worth raising here.
Yes, happy to. It's something we raised before. I can't remember all the details. To do with it's the reorganisation of CSE contacts. I think the false view was that, I think, everyone feel free to put me right, was that it's not a specialist role. All policing should be trained sufficiently in CSE, and it shouldn't be a sort of one-person job in each borough. We've just had a bit of feedback in the office that I think people who use that resource are finding it harder to get sort of responses back. So when they had an individual, albeit all officers were trained in that, they were up to one person and got that what they felt was a good response. Now that person's gone sort of back into general policing, they find that response slightly harder to get for whatever reason. I don't know the case itself. But
Well, so it was quite a concerning letter, and it was from a school. So if we could forward that to you, the school feeling now that they didn't have a point of contact, and they felt that they'd identified some potential CSE victims, and that their concerns were not being picked up in the way that they should have been.
Okay. Yeah, if that letter could come to me, please, because it should be the process, and I'm aware of the post that you're talking about. The VAT team pick up, or should be picking up, all of those cases. There's then a multi-agency assessment and a lead person in whichever agency is the right agency for the risk to that child, should then be the lead person and should be contactable. So it's really concerning to me that that's not happening.
Yeah.
So if you could send me the specifics, and then I can work with the VAT team to see where the gap is.
So I think the VAT team referred it back to the person who has now gone back into general policing.
And that shouldn't have happened. So yes, please, if you could send me the specific details, and I'll look into that.
All right, thank you. Can we just also check then, Lisa, whether that is just happening in that particular geographical area, or whether that process is where it needs to be?
Yes, we'll do. And the VAT team is a force-wide resource that then should link into the multi-agency resources across the county. So I'll check whether it's that specific location, or actually there's a process issue. I've also picked up some review of the multi-agency working as a result of the safeguarding boards. So it links very closely to some of the work that we're having a look at in terms of going out and reality checking when you feed somebody into the system what actually is happening in reality on the ground. So it will fit in quite well with that reality testing.
Okay, thank you. Yeah.
So we've had a signed off single tender action now to go forward with a piece of work with PACE. So they are recruiting currently, and we'll have a dedicated North Yorkshire worker to support parents of child sexual exploitation, hopefully by October.
Right, okay.
It's just a recruitment process permitting.
Okay, that's really good news. And so what would be helpful to sort of understand is when I'd had early discussions with them, they felt that it takes them a good sort of period of time to get bedded in, to build the partnerships up and to get cases coming forward, and it just to be able to understand the sort of expectations around that would be helpful.
Just a question on that, Jenny, if I can then. So once we establish that group, do we understand the process by which information, feedback, learning is fed back into operational policing then, once that group's established?
Yeah, I think what we were envisaging, because we've also got the MESMAC support service for CSE victims themselves, and we've also kind of a later action point for me is we've just gone through the process to commission the child sexual exploitation support service to fill the gaps in relation to CSE support after crime as well. So we've gone through that process through an invitation to tender. We're not quite at the end of that process, but we have got a provider who would like to support us to fill the gap in relation to that service. So we'll then have a support service for victims and a support service for parents. We're utilising the referral process through VEMT to get individuals, so young people, into the service. So we would envisage that that offer is made to every young person's parent or guardian, and they link in through the VEMT process.
So can I suggest then, because I think the operational colleagues have a discussion with PACE around how best to make that work, because their experience is that it can encourage people to come forward in the first instance, and what I don't want it to be is to be at the end of the process. It needs to be up front and early. Yeah.
Sean Page has been involved in the invitation to quote process and the kind of process.
Yeah,
that
it's
we've
not a
gone through
referral
the
at the
CSA.
end of the process.
No.
That is, it's too late by
Understood.
then.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We'll make sure it fits in
Yeah.
much better with what's going on operationally. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. 138. Paul, on that, I think what I was asking for was a much more detailed understanding of the impact of cross-border crime, rather than the sort of general 30% statistic, which has sort of been around for a long time. And now that we've got the analyst in place in the Rural Crime Task Force, I'm assuming that that information will be part of what they...
It certainly can be, Chair. I guess it certainly can do, Chair. I guess this action's been here for a while, hasn't it? It's been clear over what information you...
So this came about from certain areas experiencing more cross-border crime than other areas. So in the centre of York, you've probably got a lot less cross-border crime than you have in Stokesley or Selby or wherever it is. And I am assuming then that through the Rural Crime Task Force, those hotspots around rural cross-border crime will be identified, rather than it just being the sort of standard 30% across the force area statistic. You see what I mean? That's what I'm getting at.
Yeah, and in respect of that, I'll take an action to speak across with Amanda Oliver in terms of proactive policing, which is where the Rural Task Force sits at the moment, to get a more detailed breakdown of the impact on, rather than just the figures, the actual, some of the detail, although maybe sanitised in respect of naming people, but the sort of makeup and demographics of the people that are involved in those crimes, and maybe outcomes in terms of prosecutions, links to our surrounding forces, etc. Is that the sort of data that you wanted to look at?
Yeah, so I mean, obviously there've been some successful operations recently, haven't there? But
there have, and there's some in the pipeline in relation to ANPR, which probably is down to some of the particularly down to the investment around convoy work and convoy analysis. So I suppose the only limiter I'd put on it is that, of course, undetected crime, we can allocate, some are linked to patterns, but some are linked to the fact that we simply don't know who's committed the offence. Also in town centres like Harrogate and York, albeit there's not such an obvious cross-border element, there are organised crime groups who target the particular town centres. And I think when we refer to cross-border, largely in this context, we're talking about rural crime, but there is city centre crime with teams of shoplifters, other people who are technically cross-border. We tend to see them as organised crime groups who are perhaps organised shoplifters and the like, but won't have North Yorkshire Police residences, I think. So we just need to differentiate and I think we were talking about the former rather than the latter.
Yeah. So that links into some conversations that I've been having with Lynn Owers about some work via the National Rural Crime Network, which is looking at the impact of serious and organised crime in rural areas. Yeah. And she was really keen to try and do some analytical work around that, and certainly the sort of impact of travelling criminality in a more sort of strategic view across the country, not just how it affects North Yorkshire, but how it interlinks. So her suggestion, I said, well, how do we get that into the National Crime Agency? And her suggestion that it should come through the lead force for rural crime, which happens to be North Yorkshire, which is quite quite good news. So I think perhaps that's something, Lisa, that we could sit down and try and draw up some terms of reference and work on that.
Yeah, will do.
Yeah.
The other piece, because I was speaking to Lynn Owens last week in relation to a number of issues. One is the organised crime group mapping, and a number of organised crime groups, some of them will focus predominantly on the type of criminality that more affects rural areas. Some will just commit organised crime across any particular area, and they will move their market depending on where they think they're most likely, there's most profit, quite bluntly. But I think we can do. I think what's one of the key answers for rural areas will be a consistent approach to organised crime mapping, because then you'll get an approach of which areas are, which teams, which backgrounds are focusing on, if you like, the more rural market as opposed to anything else.
Yeah, and I think that was partly so, and also there was a sort of feeling amongst commissioners that things like the regional organised crime units, the ROCUs, and the National Crime Agency dealt with a certain level of criminality, and actually had there been enough work done, analytical work done at the it's still organised but isn't at the level that the ROCUs perhaps would necessarily deal with, and looking at that type of activity as well.
And I think therein lies the challenge of policing across the bits which always sit between agencies. There will always be something that sits underneath the National Crime Agency level and sits, sometimes just above one force, but doesn't sit above a number of forces' targets, and hence why some of the investment in ANPR, because that specifically is looking at people who are cross-border, using vehicles as cross-border criminals. But we'll certainly look at that and try and give you the most comprehensive answer we can, as we're going to be the national lead in any event. I'm sure ACC Oliver will pick up that work as well.
Okay, thank you. Anything else on page 6?
Just Jane Wintermeyer gives her apologies today. She's in court today. I had spoken to her about the orders, and we certainly from a domestic violence perspective, and that just as one area, we've got in excess of 60 orders to date, which actually, compared to our most similar forces and compared to many metropolitan forces, is far higher. She will report formally on that, and will pick up the suggestion by Will in relation to the impact of those orders or the effectiveness of the outcome of those orders over due course. And I think, again, whether it won't just be her, but of course it will be the team who are supporting those orders in the respective districts across the force.
Jenny?
If I can pick up 143, I've just briefly mentioned that on the back of, I think it was the May corporate performance, we met and talked about the MESMAC and BASIS CSE support service for victims after crime, and then discussed the appropriateness of us going out for an invitation to quote, which we did to fill the gap in that service, which is around standard risk victims and Hamilton, Richmondshire and Craven as geographical areas. We've gone through that invitation to quote process. We're almost at the end of that. Sean Page has been involved in that from an operational perspective, so I will bring that back to the next meeting if that's appropriate in terms of a result.
Yeah, great. Thank you very much.
In relation to 144, that's also mine. Just to update, in relation to the SARC, as I updated Regional Collaboration Board last week, we did have a number of concerns around the Mountain Healthcare Service. We developed an action plan in partnership with Regional Procurement and Mountain Health. They've undertaken to provide us with information around the majority of those actions, which we've closed. There were 3 outstanding actions at the beginning of the week. We've closed another 2 of those. There's 1 outstanding action at the moment. It's mainly around the self-referrals, because obviously the processes have changed from an internal approach to an external approach, which has meant there are some concerns around all individuals who self-refer getting a referral into a support service after they go through that SARC process. And the second is around anonymous intelligence being provided to the force so that we can make sure that we can protect the public. So that's some of the things that we're working through operationally with Karen Warner, and we'll do that.
So where does Crime Stoppers fit into that then, if it's anonymous?
In relation to the individual who's been through the SARC process providing information.
Oh, I see, right.
Without their name being associated
okay,
with it. So it's just in relation to that.
Yeah, okay.
That's appropriate. 145 is also mine, but I was just asking for some clarity around that one. I haven't undertaken any action on that, but I'm happy to. In relation to demand outside the core hours of service for the force control not street triage, the mental health triage service.
Will that be part of the ongoing assessment of that service?
We will try to. I think that the difficulty that we had, and part of the reason that we set up this service, was it's really quite challenging for us at the moment within the force to understand what our demand is around calls for service, which include a mental health issue. So we can and we are collecting data when we have that service available between 10 and 10:30, now 7 days a week since the 6th of July. However, the individuals in the force control room are not providing a service to every single person who has a mental health concern who comes through the force control room. They're been providing support and triage service when they're requested to. So we're not collecting information every day about how many people have a mental health concern. That's part of the vulnerability flagging, but as we've talked about previously, that doesn't capture everything.
Is that as a result of people ringing in and it's not apparent immediately that it's a mental health issue? It's then dealt with not as a mental health issue and it's not until later down the line and then that's not picked up afterwards? Or is there a training issue for the staff within the FCR in respect of recognising, and I'm just not quite sure where the root cause sits, and it would be good to do a piece of work.
Absolutely, yeah, and I imagine that that's the action that we might want to take forward as a kind of a group of interested parties. But
I think we need to. So with Bill Scott and Rob Bowles, I think we need to understand that, because that's actually our true benchmark of what the demand is. So even though there'll be imperfections in there, because clearly someone can present without any mental health issues, and the call taker can't be a mind reader in relation to that. So it's going to be a perfectly logical discussion, but the mental health issues underpin that demand. But actually, if we could recognise as close as we were able to the demand and the work that Bill's done, I know he's done quite a bit of work, and Rob Bowles should be able to then promote that, because we're talking about the same staff, it's just a different shift pattern, isn't it? That's the issue. Whether they take a call at 2 in the morning or 2 in the afternoon, they would be recognising that, and they would be funneling those onto the triage team in any event. So I don't see the particular difference of what time they take the call of the day or night, and then so the only difference would be the specialist knowledge from there to then examine exactly what the drivers of the call are. So we just need to work out what the difference is between those two.
I'm very happy to take away a piece of work to look at the data that is currently collected. I guess my concern is that there's probably, as we've just talked about, a much wider need that's not currently documented, and that is probably the more challenging piece.
But that links into the discussion we had earlier about the increase in demand.
It does, and and again it links into some options with Richard Anderson about tasking and committing, with the university to do a piece which would be quite labour intensive, but would be worth doing, which might be unpicking several hundred or even several thousand incidents, and then trying to not regrade them, because we've got the grading right, but trying to understand exactly what the core driver for that issue was, because we are seeing increased demand. We are seeing, as I said to the Commissioner earlier, we're seeing the category of PSW calls creep up, currently to just under 44%. I know not all of those are mental health, we're not saying they are, but there are some consistent themes of need and care and all those sort of issues that are underpinning those figures. So we do need to, if we're going to commission a service going forward, the closer we can get to the accurate number, the better. And we should look nationally as well to see if there's any best practice how we do that. But again, Bill Scott should be on with Commander Jones in the Met, because she's the mental health lead for the country in relation to policing. So if they do anything to adapt their figures in any force control, when they think it is successful, we ought to pick up on that. So Bill should be on.
Yeah, I also just wonder, I don't know if this is a silly idea or not, but obviously the NHS are trying to deal with a demographic problem. If this sounds like this change is too quick for anything like that, but whether just as as people get older and those sorts of issues might present more, whether it's just the start of a shift towards those kinds of issues, I don't know. Demographics changing.
We're not sure. I suppose we have to just keep doing the work and keep assessing what that is. And I suppose we're looking for triggers in other changes in service or legislation. I mean, I'll be interested to see what the official figures are from local authorities in terms of homelessness. Yeah, and those sort of figures, because you even anecdotally now you see in York, when I was walking through the other evening, a lot more people sleeping indoors and on the streets than I've seen for some time. Some of that is out of choice, but some of it's not out of choice. And where that actually sits, because the local authorities have to provide those figures every year, so it'd be interesting to see. There's just one example, there could be lots and lots.
But I mean, I was up in Scarborough recently and I went to their Thursday tasking meeting and they were reporting similar issues.
Right.
So they also said there's a seasonality to it as well.
Definitely.
But yeah.
Perhaps, Lisa, if we could raise that in adult safeguarding with county and city, just to see when they would formally report, because it'd be interesting, because I think they do have to formally report at least once a year on homelessness. There might be other themes as well, but I think they certainly do once a year.
And also, because obviously homelessness isn't just about people sleeping rough, it's about people without a permanent place.
Yeah, there's categories.
Yeah, there's different categories, and I wonder whether it links in with the discussion we had around young people, as well as what numbers are young people as well as adults as well. I've just got one thing that I want to raise, which is linked to the 144, sort of. But obviously we've got the research that has come back from around the children's service. I think that needs to be taken seriously, and I'd like to see a response from the force to it. Yeah, thank you.
So, can we just confirm, so that have you got the...
It's sitting with me at the moment. I'll make sure it's shared more widely and then we have a plan. Yeah.
We'll pick up.
Yeah, okay. I mean, it has implications for how the services develop going forward, but it also has, I think, some more immediate implications as well. So, yeah.
Could I just mention one more thing about the foster control room? At the moment, we haven't been able to achieve that the mental health practitioners have a direct contact with the officer or the individual who's experiencing the mental health crisis. At the moment, they go through the call handler. My assumption on commissioning this service was that we would hope to have direct contact between the practitioner and the officer or the individual in mental health crisis. I just want to make sure that that's the way that the board would like to see the service move, and then we'll work on making that achievable.
I wasn't actually aware of that. My understanding was that if a call came through, that the mental health worker in the control room was actually speaking to the person on the telephone, was my understanding of what was being provided.
That's not my current understanding of what's actually happening.
So what's the reason for that, then,
I think some of that is around training, because there's a significant training programme that call handlers go through. So I think that's part of the reasoning. But I think there's probably a little more to it than that as well.
It's not information sharing, is it?
I don't think so. I don't think that's the issue. No.
Right.
Can I suggest we just check on the reality? Because my understanding was the same as yours, Lisa, that I thought direct contact was being made. So it might worth just do some reality check-ins to
we'll take that offline.
What is happening and how can we improve that service?
Of course, yeah.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you. Okay, so if there's nothing else arising out of that action log. Nope, okay. So if we move on to item 3 then, the forward planner. Has anybody got any comments on this? No, so the only thing that I would like to see coming back here is the 101 stuff. Sorry, just to...
I've already looked at James, what date are you going to have it?
All right, thank you.
Yeah, as soon as, sorry, Chair. As soon as we get it, we'll schedule it into the next available meeting, and we'll go through that process as quickly as we can.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Have we had any... Did we have any questions from the public before? No. No. Okay. Right, Maria.
Okay, thank you. Just a quick overview of inspection activity that we've got up and coming. We've got a number of internal inspections that are ongoing at the moment through things like our information management department and through intelligence analysis, but we also have an external an external inspection on the audit report, which is undertaken by HMRC. On the horizon, we've got the HMIC effectiveness inspection, which is due in September. And we heard earlier today that HMIC are probably going to be doing an inspection around hate crime, but obviously more information will come out as time progresses on that particular matter.
Okay. I'm just going to flag this for probably in relation to item 7. But obviously, we've got on here the JSIA. I want to understand how that links with force management statements and the police and crime plan. So just park that until we come on to item 7.
Chair, for clarification, in terms of HMIC's inspection, we've got the dates for the effectiveness inspection. Last year, although vulnerability is a pillar of effectiveness, they were run separately. Do we have dates yet from HMIC for this year's vulnerability inspection?
I haven't been made aware of anything yet, Paul. I can double check, but I haven't been made aware of anything.
Okay, anything else on that? No. So the hate crime was the one that came out of the announcement today, was it? Yes. Okay. Jenny, Joe.
So we've got priority 3 prevention and early intervention as a presentation today. The first part of the presentation is Inspector Brooks' bounce, so I shall hand over to her to start off.
Thank you.
Are we having the slides on the screen? Thank you.
That's it, we've got it.
Yeah.
And the slide show, let's go back to the beginning.
Hopefully. Sorry, that's not the right
That's not it.
presentation. It's the priority 3 presentation. You are absolutely right. That's my fault. Apologies.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. So the first one, the deliverables 1 and 2, relates to young people to reduce likelihood to becoming victims and committing crime or antisocial behaviour. For the first one, the Children and Young People Strategy, there was a review carried out in June 2016. The Youth Commission has been extended for a further 2 years. Some further actions have been agreed, been developed to support this, which includes continuing with the big conversation, young people being involved in development, delivery and evaluation. And this has been agreed through some work plans with milestones to be achieved within the first period of June 2016 to May 2017. And the strategy will be revised to take account of the findings from the Youth Commission report in line with the NYYC action timetable.
Joe, can I just ask, do you want questions as we go or do you want them at the end?
Whichever would be easiest. I have an awful lot of information to get through. I was just going to pick out the main points in terms of each slide because there's about 20 some
You don't
slides.
need to read the slides out. I would, just
go through the notes.
So my question really then is, how are we going to make sure that the findings of the Youth Commission actually make a difference to the way that services are delivered?
I'll pick that up. Wendy Green in my team is working closely with Richard Anderson's Partnership Hub to bring together the Force, Commissioning and Leaders Unlocked to try and make sure that we take on board the recommendations that came from the last big conversation, understand what that means in terms of what young people would like to see change, and then work with the Force to see what is feasible in terms of implementing changes. So that's the plan in terms of the previous year's Youth Commission Big Conversation results.
Right, so when are we going to see the outcome of that process then?
So that process has only really just begun because we didn't publish the report until June. So that team of people who are looking at the recommendations has only just been convened and they've just had the first meeting. It's a little bit further on in the slides.
Okay.
If you want to kind of look at it in more detail, but I'm happy to cover it now if you want to, Chair.
No, but having read the slides, that still wasn't clear.
No, you didn't feel comfortable. Right. No, that's fine. Yeah.
So if you want to go, so it's on the sort of 3 pages hence. My question is, how is this being used to improve and change the way that the service is being delivered? There's no point having a youth commission unless we're clear that what is actually going to happen as a consequence of it.
And that kind of group has got together with a project planning workshop on the 12th of July. So I haven't seen the outcome of that workshop as yet, but that's just going to come back in terms of a sign-off to what sort of actions we want to take forward and a timeline of those, which we could bring back here if that was appropriate.
Yeah.
If we link to that, and we discussed it outside this meeting, but my expectation for Superintendent Anderson is that a thematic or themed IAG group, which is young people, will also come out of this. So we're not trying to have too many predetermined outcomes, but that is one predetermined outcome in some way, because this should facilitate the event in real time and going forwards. So they should then give us the feedback on the changes that they've instigated, or we've responded to their feedback, and then they should, as part of this, I see, test the temperature of what has actually changed. Because my commitment to them at the 3 sessions I've had with them was this just wouldn't be a one-dimensional, we've consulted with you and the document looks slightly trendier, or some other cooler word than trendy, but should actually reflect the front changes in the front line to how that interaction is going on. That's the true test of it. Yeah. And ultimately, through different partnerships with cadets groups, with other groups, and actually with the groups who may not be initially predisposed positively to us, to work with those groups and actually find out what the difference is in relation to stop and search, other themes, how they feel about those big items. So that's I think my expectation personally after the commitment I made to those individuals who presented the first piece of work.
So generally speaking, I suppose what I'm struggling to see with this paper is there's lots of stuff being done, but I don't know what is happening as a consequence of it all being done.
And in all honesty, nothing as yet in terms of addressing the recommendations that came from the young people. That's the next
I understand that, but if you take the Crucial Crew one, it says an evaluation of Crucial Crew was completed, so what's changed? Mm-hmm. You see what I mean? I want to understand what are the outcomes of all of these pieces of work. Where are we heading with it and what are we trying to achieve?
Yeah. And I think that was one of the things that I know that Superintendent Anderson was looking at in relation to the review of the youth strategy and how the different pieces of work that have been undertaken feeds into a refresh of that document as well.
So maybe what would be good then would be once, because there is a draft, isn't there? Yeah. Is to, I want to understand where we are now and where we want to go and what improvements we want to make. And these are all the things that we're doing to get there, but what isn't clear is where we're heading, and I want to understand where we're heading.
So the pressure would be for me, having been to Crucial Crew and seen it weeks ago, or probably several months ago now, but relatively recently, what's been the evaluation, for example, the domestic violence theme, which I thought was very well presented and very well done. What's the evaluation of that programme of work with the cohort of several thousand young people across the county? Because it was done well, but from their perspective, how have we assessed that as an output from schools and what they're saying and the discussion? Because actually, a lot of Crucial Crews should be stimulation for further discussion, shouldn't it? Because actually they've experienced a scenario, they've had what you should do, but actually, in reality, how's that being picked up? And I'd also like to try and understand in the longer term, how's that being picked up by year 7s as they do the transition from primary into secondary school? Because I think that's, that continuity element's really key as we pick up the younger end of secondary school children. But I'm sure if we do those themes, we'll pick that up.
So it says it's had a big positive impact, and I was like, well, what evidence do you have for the fact that it's had a big positive impact?
Yeah. So
you've got a question mark as well. Yeah. Okay. So what would be helpful then, maybe, is once the refresh of the youth strategy has got a bit further, to bring back the overall plan as to actually what we're seeking to achieve with all this work, because there's lots of really good work going on, but it's trying to sort of work out where we're going and what we're doing with it.
Okay, for the Safer Schools, there 2 were in the pilot scheme from September 2015, York High and Grange School.
Joe, sorry, you don't need to go through all this now. We've had our say on it.
So we're fine. On all those, I think we're okay.
Yeah.
I mean, I think we know what we want to see. So the feedback as the action is the outcome of the programme of work we're engaged with across this whole area. So when we're at a point where we can actually deliver some of those, it doesn't have to be all of them at once, so we can come back in part, or you can do that through whichever process you like. And through the partnership structure we've got at the moment, report on the progress against those, and just some key fundamental questions, really. And if we can't answer them, say we can't answer them just yet, but this is the plan on how we intend to answer them in the longer term. Because some are longer term ones, some are, the evaluation's been done, so let's have the good and the bad parts of the evaluation. Don't need to, if there are parts we need to drop and reshape, then fine.
So also the other thing is, so for example, if this were locked into a strategy, my question would be, how are we then dealing with those young people who are, in the really difficult category in terms of their offending behaviour? How does that link in with things like No Wrong Door? And what are we doing? What cohorts of young people are we targeting with what, and what are we trying to seek to achieve? Yeah.
So, okay, you've got that, and I think under SSP you could apply all the same questions to some of those bullet points. You could apply the same questions to the bullet points. So it talks about midterm review, it talks about September 16, 12-month pilot. Will there be as a result of that? So I think the themes are there across those areas to come back to, and we'll probably discuss them with ACC Winwood outside the meeting to make sure we get those outcomes timetabled over the autumn.
Thank you.
I don't envision you want to go through anything else on the Youth Commission. No? Nothing else? No? Okay. So the next area is around deliverable 3. So this is working with partners to develop interventions that prevent alcohol-related harm, ASB and crime. So again, I don't intend to go through the slides. If there was any queries or questions in relation to the slides.
On page 2, when we look at the Scarborough custody pilot, I was looking at those numbers, and we only got 9 fully completed. Is that compared to other pilots? Is that the numbers we're looking for? Is that disappointingly low?
I think it was disappointingly low. There hasn't been a review of the success, in essence, other than that data there, around as to whether we would look to repeat something in custody around that pilot. It wasn't our pilot, it was a public health pilot through Drug Train to train our staff to deliver a brief intervention. So,
and I think the theme for me when I read that was actually that may not be the point when the people want to actually access the
absolutely,
because they're in custody for drink-related matters, which is probably not the high point of their week or month, and it's actually should be driven by the person who's actually needing the assistance or help to address those alcohol-related issues. So again, I know we've done things in the past in relation to this, but it has to be, there has to be that sort of point where it's the tipping point, isn't it? Where they need some assistance, need help, but
So just to build on what you've just said there, so this links in also to the conversations we've been having with the probation service around the potential tagging scheme. I spent a good two or 3 hours with a number of offenders who had alcohol-related issues. And the thing that came out time and time again talking to those offenders goes back to the point we discussed before, is the timeliness of interventions. And they're basically saying, well, you know, I really want to change my life, I want to change my behaviour, and they can't get any treatment for 6 weeks, by which case it's too late. And it's trying to, and actually the providers of those services are equally frustrated with the lack of timeliness of those interventions. And the tagging scheme has the potential to solve that problem, because the support has to be delivered at the same time as the tagging, otherwise the whole thing falls apart. So question is, are those conversations with the probation service ongoing around that?
They are. We've been discussing with Purple Futures about the piece of work. The pilot work has now the decision has been made internally to do that pilot work in Lincolnshire. So they worked the previous...
When you say internally?
With Purple Futures. So the CRC are going to do a piece of work in Lincolnshire around tagging model, but we're in discussion around why we wouldn't do something in our area as well.
So when that doesn't coincide with the conversations I've had with Martin Davis in any shape or form.
Okay. That's the message that's coming to me from the CRC.
I think we might have an opportunity at local criminal justice board.
I think we might we?
Tomorrow afternoon.
Right, let's pick this up tomorrow then, Tim. Yeah. Because certainly the conversation that I had with Martin about 10 days ago was that was not that.
Okay, let's do it.
Right, okay,
Yeah.
right. Have they changed their mind?
This was from a couple of weeks ago. It could be that your conversation with Martin happened after it, but it was a Grimsby-based pilot that the kind of the sign-off had happened internally for them to go ahead with that.
Okay, right, well, we'll pick that up with Martin tomorrow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The next slide is around the City of York social marketing intervention again. Unless you want me to, I don't propose to go through the slide.
No, the only thing that slightly confused me was this issue of being jointly commissioned with South Yorkshire Police.
I think that was just a mistake, apologies.
Right, okay, it's just been procured via South Yorkshire.
Yes.
No, I don't think it has.
No, it hasn't.
There's nothing to do with South Yorkshire.
South Yorkshire.
No,
It's just
right,
a mistake
okay,
for it
all
to
right.
be.
Okay.
The next one, Chair, is for licensing. There's quite a bit of information on the slide. A couple of things just to pick out of particular note. There's been some work with the City of York Council for the Community Impact Zone, just some issues that were raised, which are being looked at currently.
Update the meeting in relation to that, because they've actually approved the changes to community, the CIZ in York. So I've spoken to Matthew France, because I went to the licensing committee to represent North Yorkshire Police unusually, because I think it was such an important issue for us. So that's been through licensing committee now, and so the loopholes that licensees were exploiting and exploring in relation to opening up a restaurant and then turning it into a drinking establishment have been closed off. And I think we've challenged the City of York in relation to their wider alcohol strategy and how that's reflected in the approaches to their licensing committee in a positive way. But and just pay credit to Matthew France and the licensing team, because they presented a very credible position in terms of what we need to do. I think it's now a political and a vision thing for the city in terms of what we want to see the city. It's not just City of York, of course, but we're talking about the City of York in this instance. What do we want it to look like in 5 or 10 years' time? Because unless you keep a tight grip on the licensing issues, it will change the nature and character of the city, and I've made that clear to the current Chief Executive, and when I meet the new Chief Executive, I'm going to make it clear again in August.
Yes, so, I mean, it is a bit frustrating because these conversations have been going on for quite some time, haven't they?
At least a decade.
Yeah.
I had the same conversation in 2003, 2004.
Yeah.
And really since the licensing changes, the big national licensing changes, but what we see is in a really big city, the impact of that is diluted across a different area. This is a very small city in reality, and it's really felt across the entire city centre. And that seems to me the biggest difference. I mean, there's no point comparing it to a Manchester or Liverpool or somewhere else. You just, those licensing changes are lost, and you can have nightclub areas and areas where there's little residential impact. It also has an impact on all the issues that we see in terms of our response to the city centre and how we provide the adequacy of policing that's required in terms of emergency, late night economy and all those other issues.
It is frustrating because routinely I'm asked, what are the police doing about it? And we end up picking up the pieces of a lack of strategic decisions being made elsewhere.
Yeah, and that is the case. And whether you look at Scarborough, Harrogate or York, there are all key areas that we have to do work in, and it has to be a partnership. If we let the side down in terms of policing, that's one thing. If the right strategies are in place for the licensing, the appropriate licensing of communities in those places, you're going to have problems. But that's the colour, I think.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, just the next one, sorry. And then for project 6, through design and planning, there's a bit of detail in relation to the ALOs. The work that they've been doing between December 2015 and April 2016, they've been consulted on 151 applications for new developments and plans which relate to takeaways, licensed premises, etc. So obviously a fair number of planning that they've been involved with. So any questions around the ALOs?
Could just a different action for the autumn, please. Could we see, in relation to the new developments, what representations we made in relation to amendments and funding that we may seek through new developments for provision of policing services? So I understand the bit about individual changes because we would not, that's a more tactical licensing issue. I'm interested in the bigger developments, please, across the county and city.
So in particular, the area where this is raised continuously is Eastfield. So the developments there are huge, absolutely massive.
Thanks, Sharon. I was just going to say, NYP, the ALO has been consulted on 151 planning applications. Do we know the impact they have on those?
I've just got that statistic. I haven't got any further breakdown, unfortunately. I can get it if you would like to see it.
It would be interesting to know whether anything was actually changed as a result of those.
Okay. I mean, Eastfield is a case in point, really. I mean, so the interesting thing about Eastfield is that the building that's going on there now is actually going much faster than the original planning applications phased approach, and so the impact that will have will be much quicker than was anticipated, and we need to know, whether or not we're geared up. Yeah.
I know that Alistair Day has had some meetings with the local authority, and that work from those meetings has been fed in through Richard Anderson to the ALOs, so they are absolutely on top of the latest information and engaging. What we need to keep up to speed with is what impact is that having, and are they getting the responses back. I think there is paperwork from the planning application process where the ALOs can document the changes that were made as a result of their representations.
Okay.
So I do believe that when they go to planning committees and amendments are made on their recommendations, that is documented, and I think we can produce that.
Okay, so for example, at the latest surgery I had in Eastfield, there'd been a number of issues around new residents moving into some of the estates and causing difficulties, particularly when they're people from outside the area, and it's those type of things that you know, the local police there are on it and they're dealing with it, but as that progresses, it's the type and nature of housing as well.
Okay. The next couple of slides.
Sorry, there's also huge quantities of houses being built to the north of Harrogate as well.
Yes.
Very significant volumes.
Okay, the next couple of slides both relate to the community safety hubs. An update was given a few months ago in relation to it, and the couple of developments since then are development of a JCG, which I'm chairing. There are a number of work streams that sit under that JCG, and there are a number of areas that have developed into pilot phases, namely Hambleton and Richmondshire, Craven and Harrogate will be around mid-September time. So they're the recent changes to the hubs. Any questions in relation to the hubs? Yeah. Thanks, Jenny. For the troubled families, there's quite a lot of detail on the slides. On the second slide, there's a note on there in relation to the flags and how that system works. You'll see a note on there in relation to York. Obviously, we don't put any flags on for York because of the analysts being funded by NYCC. And the note really is around the numbers don't exactly add up when you look in relation to the number of open cases in terms of the flags. And that's in relation to trying to make the connection between those that sit within the criteria and those on the system don't always exactly match. So there's a little bit of work done by the analysts to be able to pick out some of the details of who's linked to which family and what the relationships are. So that's an ongoing piece of work by the analyst.
Right, so, I mean, Craven is a complete outlier. So you've got 413, and, you know, if you look at Richmondshire, you've got lower numbers of open cases, yet much higher flags. So there's a clear issue there.
The actual flags, the additional criteria is contact with the police within the last 12 months. So it might be that if you look at Craven, of those 63, the majority, of the 413, there might have been a number of those that have not had contact with the police, so they wouldn't be flagged on the system. So they have to hit.
I don't believe that data. It's such a big discrepancy. I don't believe that data.
Okay.
It needs look. Can you check it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I mean, it is huge, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And the new developments are detailed there within the slide in relation to the flagging, the family profiles. There's some work ongoing around OCGs and possibility of adding information from nominals are concerned to the tactical reports for each area. So that's the work that the analyst is ongoing with at the moment.
Yeah, I think what is interesting is the trying to get below the numbers and or understand the numbers, because it tends to suggest then the complexity of the Scarborough and the volume of repeat demand in Scarborough is considerable, even when you do rough figures in your head about ratios, isn't it? You've got a very high conversion rate, much higher conversion rate than you have in Selby or in any of the other districts. So you almost just under 10% there.
It is. Those figures look really odd. They do look really odd.
So
I'll get them checked.
Yeah, we just get them checked. If we can come, if there's a additional action slide, we can just confirm or actually ratify next time round. So we see it in the actions, please, Chair. That'd be great. Thank you.
No problem.
So the next area is around deliverable for develop effective approach to substance misuse commissioning. Again, I don't propose to go over the slides unless you would like me to, and then just to answer any questions.
One particular question which keeps coming back is the ability of individuals to dual pathway services in relation to that. I keep getting fed back whether it's alcohol, mental health, drugs, alcohol, mental health, so that's the the difficulty of trying to access that. Is that something you're seeing as part of this process? Because it's certainly the area that I know most about is alcohol and mental health issues, and trying to get dual commissioning for that seems really, really problematic.
I think there are definitely challenges first with providers who say you need to be clear from a diagnosis on one side before you can receive treatment for something else on the other side, and that still seems to be the practitioner-provider response to some of those issues.
So how do we solve that? Because that is a perennial problem.
I mean, we've got people with lifelong addiction to alcohol and lifelong mental health who are saying, yeah, one of those has got to give before they can access. It just seems a nonsense answer. I can understand if you got some decision, but these people are struggling with long-term dependency on alcohol, and to try and, I mean, success is to get them down to a lower dependency on alcohol and move that down sort of 50% of the alcohol dependency. But then, in reality, it means they're never going to be able to access the pathways to care that they so desperately need. It just, I've heard the answer. I'm not blaming you, Jenny, for the answer, because I've heard the answer. It's how we then push against it, because it just seems.
So any of these up for renewal at any point?
The York contract is being recommissioned this financial year.
So in the specification then that goes forward for whoever it is that is going to provide that service, can we not make that part of the specification that they actually have to be able to deal with an individual as a whole person and not sort of hive off their individual problems to different agencies?
I can definitely take it away and make it part of the discussions with the City of York in terms of their commissioning process, and undertake to have the same conversation with North Yorkshire Council.
Because we are seeing representatives from the City of York coming up, so maybe that's the conversation to have with them, Jenny, when
that would be a really good time to have
that
conversation.
Yeah.
Is it also worth pointing out to the rest of the board that there is a process being undertaken in York to reduce the amount of money being spent on the substance misuse contract? We don't propose to reduce our contributions, so the criminal justice element of the contract is safe from that perspective. However, there are a number of papers going through the internal process at CYC to reduce the amount of funding that they put to that contract.
Can I just ask, do we know what we'll end up with, what we're likely to end up with, and where the balance will lie?
In terms of the information that's currently available, it's very challenging to see the impact that it will have, because Tier 2 and Tier 3 interventions have a standard definition, and therefore it's very difficult to change the actual service that people receive. So whether that means that less people might be able to access that service, or that there is another implication, it's difficult to say for definite, but it would be logical, let's say, to suggest that that might be the case.
So will we end up contributing more than the council?
No. In terms of proportion, they shall still be contributing more. Yeah, absolutely.
But our proportion will grow in comparison to theirs.
Yes.
So then we need to understand who it is who's not going to get a service and the implications of that.
And I think that the hope and anticipation, from CYC is that they can challenge the provider to deliver the service in a different way to create those efficiencies. And there is a written paper to support that, which I shared with yourself, Chair, recently. In terms of the evidence base around the impact for the criminal justice cohort, there is some information perhaps lacking there in terms of the potential impact for our.
I just wondered whether there's any data or scrutiny or outcomes at Health and Wellbeing Board around the rounded treating the person rather than, and whether we can get an agenda item at Health and Wellbeing Board, because they have the overarching scrutiny responsibility for drug treatment and alcohol treatment services in the city, for example, in York, and I don't know whether we can influence the agenda through that meeting.
I sit on the board, so if we can get together and prepare something which is an item for the board and get it in front of them, is the challenge. My other concern is that where we sit with Together York, we know that we're dealing with individuals who've got mental health and alcohol-related issues. Some of them have taken significant demand out of the force control. I mean, significant demand out of the force control room. We're talking about going from 160 calls in 6 months to 6 or 8 calls in 6 months. That funding isn't secure because that's charitable funding and other funding. We've got to be very wary of the cumulative impact if we see some of this funding across a number of different areas diminish. But it does show that if you can get the right support for people with dual diagnosis, you can make a significant difference. It hasn't cured some of the issues, but it can significantly reduce demand.
So we were also talking earlier around doing an assessment, trying to sort of understand the demand, the PSW demand coming into the FCR. So I wonder whether we could think about this in relation to that, because then we might get a sense of any increase in demand that we will end up with as a consequence of this cut in funding.
Yeah.
We could end up cutting on this to spice our face, really, couldn't we?
So the next deliverable is around deliverable 5, demonstrating effective community awareness, prevention and early intervention services. So majority of this is around the communication strategy to ensure a number of kind of key areas. Again, this next slide is Joe's, but I don't propose that we go through the slides unless there's anything specific that you want us to pick up or out.
Just a comment, really. Of attention, which was the drug and drink driving one across the county, we saw a significant, 144 people arrested for drug and drink driving, which is an increase again. A number of that through drug driving, but the risks posed to the communities of North Yorkshire, and of course that isn't the true number because we only catch a certain proportion of that. We're actually catching higher numbers every time. So my issue is about communication and effectiveness of the prevention and education message, because it's a concern as chair of 95 Alive. I think that we could actually, each one of these potentially represents someone who could kill someone on the roads. Fortunately, the vast majority don't. They get caught and they get involved in relatively minor actions, but that's luck. The sad consequences are they are all potential people who could cause serious harm on the roads. And I just think, again, we'll challenge ourselves about what's the effective communication message, what's the message going through schools, and how are we influencing that. The drug driving influence one is the one that's is growing most significantly. Yes, we've got some of the tools to do the job now, but it's an increasing demand. But it's also an increasing threat and risk out there. So I raised that because we've had those figures back in since the last performance meeting. It's something that we need to pay attention to, I think, because the communities are concerned about those issues quite rightly.
So just to add to that, there was some feedback around proactivity and some of the excellent work that was reported through from the public in terms of some of the intelligence that came through. And there was 800 breath tests taken, so 144 arrests out of 800 is quite a lot in terms of, but particularly around the drug element, because we have that particular piece of kit and it's more widely used.
Deliverable 6, demonstrate effective impact on driver behaviour.
Jenny, can I just go back then?
Of
Can I
course,
go back to the page on the online safety bit of it?
Yeah.
Embedding a corporate approach to digital responsibility in NYP cultural shift. Can somebody translate that for me, please?
I think what the group were hoping that there would be a kind of a culture shift in terms of making sure that our online safety response is appropriate and it's shared and that everybody's on the same page about it. That was the hope for that group that got together to
for what? For whom?
For young people online.
So trying to get officers on the ground encouraging children to stay safe online.
Again, I think across the board, from a kind of an officer approach, are we saying that have we got the same message? Is it consistent? Is it, does it continue through our intranet and things like that? So it was about a corporate approach. But again, it was just a point of potential addressing through the communications plan as part of this piece of work that we did to review them.
So Louise was talking before about doing some various communication plans. Is this included in the work that she's doing?
Yes, it is, and we're in the midst of a message to parents this week about online. What's the knowledge of parents in terms of their online activity, their children's online activity? So it is part of a wider campaign, which is all about prevention and intervention. I think that. Yes, the bullet point I think needs to be a little bit more specific about who it's targeting, because I think specifically for me that's a target. Which audience is it targeting? And I think this week specifically is targeting parents, carers, and the like. And there have been different programmes which they've actually done very well, but we need to see the overall plan go through the year and how we keep coming back to those issues, because they do change, and that's what we got from the Youth Commission again. Then, what style, what mode, medium we'd use to actually try and hit the right audience, quite frankly.
So, but this goes back then to the issue around a more strategic approach, doesn't it? Because, we might have a very successful communications programme over a relatively short period of time, but how is that effort sustained at educating parents?
Right.
And who is best placed to do it? It's not just a policing responsibility.
No, the thing I'm not sure about, over the last 2 years, but we have carried out quite a lot of work. The Matt Walker's been working on the Stay Safe campaign.
Yeah.
So a lot of work has already been done in terms of public messaging. I just wonder where this fits with the work we've already done.
But I bet if you asked most parents the question around how they keep their children safe online, a lot of them wouldn't have a clue.
Yeah. And we have, and well, you're quite right, we've done a lot of work. My question would be, particularly, why we're doing it the first week in August, where half the parents will be away on holiday. There might be good reason for that. They might have looked at the reason for doing it, and it might be better than is in my head at the moment. But for me, being a switched-on parent, might be the first week of the autumn term, about switched-on, and then link it into what the academic year is doing, what the schools are doing. If we could just see the plan and how it's interlinked for children's boards and children's safety in relation to that, because a whole section of it should be around children, and a section about parents and carers, and then a section about other individuals, I would guess. But I suppose it's just getting a feel for that, so perhaps we need to see that in a bit more detail.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know, something like Christmas when everybody's buying new devices for their children, would seem to be a sort of more logical,
Perhaps,
I don't know.
Perhaps we have to see the plan, then there might be more context behind it. But I suppose it's begged a few more questions with the bullet points. We just need to see where we're going.
I'm wondering if perhaps Louise might be better placed to share some of this information, because it's really kind of sits under this, because for Richard and myself, we're senior responsible officer for this area, but the communication strategies plans don't sit with us.
Okay,
they sit with that team.
So why don't we take that as an action then,
That would be
Jenny,
great.
and ask Louise to come back to the next corporate or a corporate performance to outline what the actual comms plan is around this. Yeah. Okay, 6. Sorry.
This relates to keeping all road users safe. There's quite a lot of activity listed on this slide. Is there any questions in relation to the detail?
There's only one from me. It's an update, really. Community Speed Watch. I'm expecting the imminent start in Community Speed Watch in Richmond area around that. I've also asked in the 14 or 16 areas identified in Harrogate area, which I understand is the next, can I see a timetable for that, please, as well? Because that's the Richmond and Harrogate are the first two areas, so I want to see that timetable linked into the next X number of weeks over those 2 areas. I know the rest are going to follow throughout the county, but I would like to see those, please. So I want to go and actually speak to people who are actually starting to use the Community Speed Watch programme.
I'll come with you. I've just, the other road safety thing here, it's a small thing, but the Rural Crime Task Force are doing work with the British Horse Society around safety on the roads for horses. So just thought would mention that.
Yeah.
Yep.
Just another update. I've had a meeting with Sir Gary Verity around funding and supporting cycle initiatives across the region linked to the success of Tour de Yorkshire and hopefully the Tour de France returning if we keep winning the Tour de France. Not me personally, obviously, but so there's funding opportunities, but also marketing opportunities, but we're going to link up as the 4 road safety programmes across Yorkshire and Humberside because it makes sense in terms of that particular approach. And I'd also particularly like to pay credit to the people involved in bike safety, the RAF work they've been doing, because that's been a UK-based programme. It's been largely orchestrated and driven by staff in North Yorkshire, but we've taken national staff in as well. And it's been very well received by members of the armed forces, the RAF, but yeah, in this instance. So I think it's a credit in relation to a wider road safety programme.
Great. That's it? Yeah, brilliant. Thank you very much. Now, I've just, Phil is running a little bit late, so can I make a suggestion that we go on to just put 7 on hold until Phil arrives and then move on to item 8. So, Richard, I think that's over to you.
Sorry, I don't think we have the presentation on the No. Okay, we've got the slides. We've all got the slides, and the slides will be available after the meeting anyway. So this is just an update for the board. We asked to come back with the Athena House refurbishment debrief and lessons learned. The slides, we'll start with slide 1, which is Athena House, gives you an update when we bought it in February 2015. We have 10 different departments in there, and we have around 250 people that operate from that facility, although there are about 200 desks in there that allow them to work flexibly in new ways of working and shifts, etc. In October 2015, the ICT and Estates Governance Board provided the 813,000 for the refurbishment of Athena House, which was always planned when we purchased the facility. The refurbishment work comprised of a number of alterations that are detailed on the next slide, which included a full refit of the building. The cost also included replacement furniture, which provides us an agile, ready, open office working environment, which supports the new ways of working that we're trying to improve in the future. The timelines, the building work was expected to take around 12 weeks. We decanted the whole building, which was quite an exercise, while the refurbishment took place. It's the best way of carrying out the work. And we finished the work completed on time in March 2016, and all the officers and staff moved back in. We've had some extremely positive feedback from the new occupants and also visitors. The new furniture and layout provides a template for the layout of the new police headquarters at Alverton Court. So one of the things we obviously have done is lessons learned that we'll come on to. There's some pictures here of the new layout. The next slide shows that without any staff there before they moved in, showing the new desk layouts, the new IT, because we took the opportunity to put in the new virtual desktops and the new digital phone systems at the same time. The next one shows it with some staff in, and obviously you can see it's a nice, bright and airy feeling, and open plan working, which is very similar to how the Alverton Court layout will be, because that's all open plan with no individual office spaces. The next slide just shows the type of lockers that staff will have with the new ways of working. In terms, staff will have their own individual lockers where they can keep their own personal kit and equipment, etc. The next slide shows the new type of canteen facilities, which have been very well accepted.
I mean, I have to say the transformation is quite amazing. I mean, it was so grim before, and it wasn't it. I mean, it was, and it really is really impressive. So well done. And thank you to everybody who was involved, because I know it was quite a lot of work in a short period of time. My question really is, I suppose we did have a discussion around agile working at EB early on. It is obviously it's all sort of agile already. What has been the take up of that, and how is that bedding in, and culturally and practically?
I mean, agile is always something that the force has done in a way. I mean, we are moving to the 8-to-10 ratio, which was the recommended ratio. What you find is a lot of teams have already been working on 8-to-10 ratios, so it works quite well. The staff seem to be undertaking new ways of working quite well, although there's still to be a whole programme of work involved in agile and new ways of working rolled out. That it's hoped that will run in parallel with the refurbishment of Alverton. But what you tend to find is you will still have some teams that work sort of not 100%. When we've looked at other organisations that are doing it, for instance Durham, you have teams that are working at very high ratio that are even higher than 8-to-10 because of the way they work. And then you have other teams that might be working 5-to-5 sort of thing. So it averages out at an 8-to-10 across the organisation. But we do need to bring in the new technologies that assist that as well. So that's one of the issues that we've got to address before we move into Alberton.
So what exactly does that mean? And also, it hasn't been easy around the Unified Comms project, has it? And did that have an impact?
Yeah, I mean, the Unified Com project will obviously be well embedded by then.
But for this?
Yes. Not for this, but it will be for Alverton.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think
One hopes.
Yes. Some of the new technology obviously is everybody thinks that agile working is giving everybody a laptop and that's the answer to it. And it's not. There's lots of more involved with that. And there are other ways of people having the technology available. So we just need to work through that with the project that's ongoing and see how that comes out.
Right, but so what issues were encountered and what we're going to do about them, given that there's, you know, pressures around the IT team and all the rest of it, because I need sort of greater reassurance that we know what we're doing, really.
I think that's the Agile programme sits with HR and Rosie Holmes as the head of HR in terms of taking that project forward. So probably.
So do you feel as if that communication around is it all linked up properly, or does it need?
We are linked up, but we do need the project to progress. Rosie Holmes sits on the Estates board, but quite considerably more is the HQ17 board that is specifically around Alverton that Mr Kennedy is chairing at present, in terms of making sure that's all linked together, that the Agile is made available and is embedded before we take the move to Alverton Court.
So it's ongoing work, so as Richard says, on both the ICT and Estates board and the HQ17 board, there is a standing agenda item, or there was in the last meeting actually, wasn't there, to pick up the feedback and learning from Athena, and also on agile working as well. So there's constant cross-reference monthly now between agile working and the HQ17 project. But is it fully understood? Have we got all the lessons yet? And no, but we're working towards that.
Okay, all right. So in terms of working towards that, how do we make sure that it is landed?
The what's landed, sorry, Chair.
So we're working towards joining up the various different programmes more effectively. How do we actually make sure that that is going to happen? Because around the UC project, it didn't happen, or some of it didn't happen, did it? So the communications, there were issues with that. So it's not just lessons from that, it's lessons from this and that, and how we link it together and the impact that that has.
Sure, it's ongoing work. You're quite right. I think it's broadly accepted that the communications around the UC project didn't work as well as it should be. We take some remedial action over that to try and improve the communications. And that will be ongoing as as further work is done around UC and internal telephony. That's being tracked through the ICT steering group to make sure that lessons are learned and picked up, and the rest of the project is delivered as it should be. It's just work in progress.
Okay, all right. So so maybe the thing is to have an update on the Alverton Court project at some point in the future, a relevant point in the future.
I think it would be fair to say that with Athena, it was a consequence of timing in terms of the UC project sort of came in and the opportunity was taken to implement rather than put the old phone system back in, it suddenly became apparent that why don't put the new phone system in, and therefore it was a consequence of time. It saved a lot of money and effort and the force, but unfortunately the comms and wasn't quite ready for that, so that we were a victim of our own success in that way.
I think there's also a cultural issue for the organisation to realise the responsibility not of comms and not of technical people and not of estates people, but once the kit is there, the responsibility to understand their part in using it, which I think is the one thing because it's not an option. This is about trying to provide a more appropriate and responsive service to the public. Sometimes partners, sometimes other people, whatever that may be, and it's wrapped up in that issue. So albeit I think the decisions were made for entirely the right reason, Richard, and I support those because it did save money and it was a sensible way to do it. I think it's the individual accountability and team leaders, sergeants, other people to say, actually, all our teams have to use this kit. We have to understand how to use it. Once we understand how to use it, we use it on a daily basis, and this is normal, everyday business. It's a facilitator to providing better use of public money and a better service. And I think that's, because sometimes culturally we can look for excuses, and I don't think the kit is an excuse, quite bluntly. I know we've got to roll it out, and hopefully, the one lesson we'll learn from Alverton is we'll have that all embedded by the time we get to Alverton. So there'll be absolutely no cultural excuse, because everybody who will have, we knew they'll have already had to use it before they get to Alverton. It's one of those issues that be part of what we need to think about, because there'll be new technologies coming along as we move into Alverton, won't there? There always will be. So we need to make sure that brief is timely and we lay on the line exactly what we expect people to do in terms of the basics. And I think the basics are being available to the public when the public need to speak to us, and we've provided the right kit to do it.
Chair, I know that you cited on the detail between the three projects, but it might be worth just reinforcing the point, if I may, that HQ 17, agile working, and enhancing our IT infrastructure, including UC and telephony, they're all very much interlinked. And so when you do ask for an update on HQ 17, you might find benefits in having an update on where are we with agile working as well, and where are we with those IT projects that really centre on HQ 17, just because they're all interdependent.
And I suppose the thing about Athena House is that we've got an opportunity with Athena House to understand how it's starting to work in practice. So, whether people are changing the way that they work, and understanding the barriers to changing working practices, and not just sort of saying, right, well, we've done Athena House now, let's move on to Alverton Court. And I suppose it's not just, so it's not just the refurbishment lessons learned. It's actually, are we achieving what we're trying to achieve in terms of the way that people are actually working? John, I don't know if you can be of any help in that respect in terms of getting staff feedback.
I think once we get a little bit further down the road, and especially when we get new headquarters, I think once staff have settled a little bit more into Athena House, I think we can do a quick survey of everyone, get some feedback direct from the staff that use it.
Yeah.
I think we're definitely going in the right direction. I think Athena House is excellent. It's a really good environment now for people.
It's good.
There's a lot more facilities there for more people to use when they're, if they're travelling or passing by even, they can drop in and actually do some work rather than wasting hours driving everywhere. No, I think we're definitely going in the right direction. I'd like to see how headquarters pans out. That'll be interesting, and the move will be interesting as well.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Thank you. Lisa, do you want to go through?
I will, yes. Mindful that at the last corporate performance and scrutiny meeting there was an extensive agenda item on cutting crime and ASB linked to the performance update, so we spent quite a significant time going through the performance in detail on that element of the thematic update. So by exception, with people who've got sight of the paperwork of the performance report, looking at the executive summary then, and in line with iQuanto, we're still the latest update, third safest in England and Wales.
No, we don't count Wales. We never. So it's confused. So I, honestly, this is a serious point. All of the communications we've ever done have just been about England, and then suddenly this time around we included Wales. So why did we do that? Can we just go back to England, please?
Yes,
because that's historically all we've done. So suddenly we're.
And I think that was reported recently, wasn't it, as both? Yes, I should feedback to Stephen to just stick with the England.
Sorry.
And
consistency.
Absolutely. And in respect of that, the main exception to report, which is exactly the same as previous months' exceptions, is with the feature in the media mainly and nationally on the theme of sexual offences, use of technology, people's willingness to report, and also the focus on underage sexual relationships and as we've discussed today already, keeping people safe online, there's an increase in reporting in that particular area. And the other exception of note is in terms of non-domestic burglary, should I say, where we've seen a significantly lower than usual reporting of that from the year-on-year figures. There have been some significant operations in respect of burglary. It links back to some of the rural crime, organised crime group cross-border conversations that we had earlier. So it'll be interesting to do the additional data research on that, because I think that is linked to some of the significant reductions in terms of some of those targeted groups cross-border with some of our neighbouring forces that have been undertaken in the past few months. So moving on to the demand versus previous year.
Sorry, Lisa, can I just got a real general question around this then? So it's quite interesting when you think about where we were last year and where we are now. And obviously it's relatively early days, although we are at the end of July. It seems to me that and again, I wondered if this is related to the changes in recording practices. So last year we did see a bit of a jump. This year we're back to yellows and greens again, and I'm wondering whether what we've seen is a change in recording practices, a step upwards in volumes, and now we're starting to see it level off again?
Yes, in some of our areas, and particularly, and myself and Mr Madrick had an interesting conversation a couple of weeks ago, that we couldn't understand where something that was on the increase, i.e. violence without injury, then appeared to be green again when we thought we were on an increase, and it's because we've rolled on to year-on-year comparisons, so you're comparing it against a different plateau.
Precisely, that's what I'm saying. So we've seen a sort of step up, and then it's sort of, lack of a better word, normalising again.
Yes, and I think we've seen the same with some of the national reporting around sexual abuse.
Right.
And historical or non-recent sexual abuse, where people have been encouraged to come forward and report. So you see the initial uplift. What we should see is once we reach a new level of normality of reporting, that should then start to see, and that's the reason for the greens and oranges and not the reds, because we've reached a plateau and started to see a reporting year on year against the new norm.
So because it can be, I think the last year has been quite misleading for people. Yes. It's been quite a difficult thing to get your head around. And when you start to compare it with the statistics coming out of the crime survey for England and Wales, you've got two completely different data sets with differing opposite, going in opposite, literally going in opposite directions. And that's quite a difficult thing to explain to people.
Yes.
It is.
Yeah.
Because we struggled, that was exactly the conversation we had of, we can see the increase as a result of the recording, but then we couldn't understand why it was green again, but actually we've reached a full year profile and we're now at a new norm.
It's interesting when you make those comparisons, because we're trying to make sense. We don't want to make just binary comparisons. No. What we're trying to do is make sense of this and not just quote a percentage figure or something else, which to the man or woman in the street really means nothing. It's how they feel about actually living in their community. It's actually what areas of crime, what's the impact and trends and analysis we're looking for in terms of early prevention. So we mentioned earlier cross-border crime, and for us it's the ability to be able to prevent it in the first place, or if a trend develops, how quickly we pick up on it, because those things are absolutely key to stopping more victims becoming victims. I think there are a number of things through there. I'm interested in trends related to burglary, so it's shed burglary, garage burglary, those sort of things, because there's been some work around that. I don't think, to be honest, at the moment we fully understand why we've seen such a significant decrease, particularly at a time when traditionally, going back year on year, burglary tends to peak earlier on in the summer. So your April, May, June tends to be your peak time, and it has been over a number of years. That's not something that's come as an anomaly. So we need to try and understand what has been the outcome of that, and has it been some of the actions that we've done. We have done certain things, but I think it would be misleading to claim all those as direct links to that. But it's certainly where we claim direct links is where we can actively show that intelligence has intervened with organised crime groups or other people, and it's stopped a trend. That's when we know we've done something different. It's
Chair, last year you may recall that we carried out some work to look at the reasons why we saw that increase in volume crime, and we came back with a number of factors, which included some of the things you've said, such as increasing historical sexual offences, crime recording, but also the record of crime within 24 hours of being reported. That was one of the factors that came out. Bearing in mind we're approaching the end of the first quarter of the year, it may be useful to rerun that exercise to find out those areas where crime is increasing and those where it's decreasing. Just ask the team again to explore what the factors might be that are driving that, other than crime trends or crime series. There might be some factors that we're not fully sighted on. It was a useful exercise last year, and it might prove useful again this summer.
The other one I think we should do, and we've been doing in the past, is comparing it with our forces that surround us.
Yeah.
Because it's not a direct correlation, but it's an indication when you see patterns of performance that are outside the norms. So if we see that, it would be realistic to believe that a line on the map between ourselves and West Yorkshire won't stop criminals crossing that line either way, quite frankly. That's only part of the explanation.
Okay, so just moving on, and on that point in terms of the norms, the slide on force-wide exception bandings, victim-based crime, just reflects those conversations we've just had of when you look at the trend lines, the sexual offences other being above the line in terms of reporting linked to exactly that point, and the burglary non-dwelling, so it just reflects in that visual slide there, but we're not an outlier in comparison with our MSF or the national trends. Then we'll move on to the slides that show the tactical activity that's taking place across the force in respect of some of those outlying areas. So there's a whole raft of individual operations and problem-solving plans in place, and they're bespoke to each of the commands in response to the specific areas of demand that they're seeing themselves. And then moving on, again, we've reported and discussed the exceptions already. Stephen Murray is saying there are no localised exceptions of note for us on victim-based crime by district and previous years or ASB. So that's on a trajectory that we would have expected in terms of year-on-year performance and in line with our MSF. There are no other exceptions to report, Chair, unless there's any specific questions that people would like to ask.
Will?
Forgive me, Lisa, I think we spoke about this outside the meeting, but it might not be new. I just thought your last, you did a priority update rather than the normal crime and ASB update a couple of weeks, performance seasons ago, and you included 101 performance information in there about, do you remember about time taken to take calls and things like that?
Yes, the performance pack, we do performance scrutiny in much more detail at our operational delivery board on a monthly basis. So the performance pack that's scrutinised at that meeting, which is a separate performance pack, actually has the dashboard dials, if you like, that include 24-hour reporting of crime, that include call handling, don't they? So there's basically different slides that are scrutinised on a monthly basis at Ops Delivery Board that show different data. And you're right, when we did the thematic update, there were areas that related to thematic cutting crime and ASB that was in a performance pack alongside this monthly performance pack in relation to the thematic update.
And I just wondered, Chair, if something like 101, given it's come up a few times today, whether that should come as a sort of standard repeat item that you can sort of keep an eye on. And
Yeah, that'd be really helpful. Yeah.
I mean, absolutely, Chair, any performance data we hold is open. I mean, anything we hold, we try and make a choice, not because on the basis of good or bad or different, but actually, if it's there and you want it in here, then we will produce it in here. It doesn't matter because the 101 data is the 101 data. We actually, and I say we scrutinise on a daily basis. You'd expect us to. That's not the issue. So anything that's required. The only thing you skipped over there, Lisa, which isn't only because of my direct interest in terms of the road safety issues. What I would say, albeit encouraging, what's important to note is that still, when you compare us nationally, when you compare it to crime, where you compare it to public confidence, where you compare it to other things where we regularly find ourselves in the top quartile performing very well, still in KSI's, we find ourselves in the bottom quartile in some of those issues. So it just shows the ongoing challenges we have in relation to those issues. I'm not ducking that issue. It's a challenge. 6,000 and a bit miles of roads. Some of them, actually I always caveat this by saying some of the most dangerous roads, but 60 mile an hour rural roads, and the difficulty of getting that message across and actually enforcing that. It's a continual challenge for this organisation. We do it in partnership, we do other things, but we are the enforcement arm. So it reinforces for me the investment we've made in relation to road safety camera vans coming up, the ability to get a better coverage going across the force. There's the rationale for it. It's not for any other, it's to try and impact, because we find ourselves in that bottom quartile in relation to KSIs. And I think I know we just spend an awful lot of time talking about crime quite rightly, we talk about antisocial behaviour quite rightly, but I only comment based on the tragic consequences of last week, and it was a tragic, absolutely tragic accident, but that's 4 people who lost their lives in one incident. And so I just remind us of the fact that that's where we're at, and we're working very hard to impact on, but part of the reason why we made that investment was to try and impact on those KSI figures.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point. Will, have you got...
I just wondered, Tim talking about KSIs, and we've talked about 101 today, whether, I think what we do at the moment is very much what we think the public are interested in, which is crime and ASB and things and KSIs, whether we should go back to the public and find out if there's anything else they're interested in that we don't report on. So 101 might be a good example of what they'd like to see that isn't currently in there, and whether they might be interested in other issues as well.
So I wonder then, as part of the police and crime plan consultation that we will be doing, whether actually that's something that we could ask the public around what it is that they'd be interested in. So if we can add that in as an action. I've just got one other, there's a big outlier on Craven on the ASB. There'll be a particular reason for that. Do you know what it is?
No, I can ask Stephen in terms of looking at the trend lines when he compares, and obviously we don't put all of the trend line maps in here.
Yeah.
As per trend, he's saying there's no outliers in respect to that, but you're right, it looks like there are. But it may be that there's such small numbers that they're sitting still within the trend lines.
I don't know. But there may have been a spate of incidents or something, but it'd be just to... I know Jeff Crocker has written to people recently, and that has gone down extremely well around some of the comments that came up at the police and crime panel about... So that's just sort of following on from that. Okay, HR. We did have a long discussion about this at EB, didn't we?
If we did, if I can just briefly summarise it for the meeting then, or Paul, you summarise it and then we'll come back.
Sorry, Jeff, I didn't mean to steal your thunder. I'm trying to help. The discussion this morning, we looked at the established police officer figure of 1,400. We're currently operating with a number of abstractions in the region of 237 or so that are made up of long-term sickness and vacancies that currently exist. So we've just reviewed our recruitment plan to see how we can expedite recruitment later this year to meet some of those deficiencies. But that's work ongoing, and we did discuss it in perhaps a bit more detail this morning.
If we as a group will work hard over the next few days and coming weeks to make sure we maximise the opportunities to try and get the right skill sets at the earliest opportunity in the organisation, and that has an impact not just for officers but staff as well, as we get into a replacement programme in terms of those who've been successful in various other areas as well. And we've got some critical areas of business that we've spoken about privately, force control being one, links back to 101, other areas from neighbourhood policing, and trying to get the replacement programme right for PCSOs who've been successful. So there's a number there, some of which we should be really positive about because they made the transition into being officers, but it does pose some other challenges in relation to ongoing commitment to try and make sure we have local people understanding what their local neighbourhood teams feel like and the like.
And so that revised plan is coming to an executive group meeting imminently.
That's correct, Chair.
Yeah. Fantastic, thank you. Okay, I think that's
about it.
The mental health. We have just had a discussion about that, really, haven't we, around the flags and...
We've talked about trying to make sure we get the right information as a benchmark in relation to mental health as a driver, for instance, across the organisation. I know Jenny, Bill, others are working very hard with the force control room staff to get that assessment right. I suppose, in summary for this meeting, we should still celebrate the fact that we've actually got record low levels of police cells being used to places of safety, and they are used now by exception, and every incident is debriefed. Everyone is debriefed in relation to, and usually it's excessive use of violence, and the staff in health-based places being able to deal with that. Actually, they're also quite rightly challenged, because in some areas they say no to any people being held in police cells. But I think the significant reduction, huge reduction to where we are at the moment is really positive. I say privately, I think we still, or publicly, we still have a target of 0, quite bluntly, if we can get down to that point. So there's a lot of work still going on with that, and we will continue that work because we know it's a major driver of demand and trying to get an appropriate response for people who've got mental health illnesses.
Okay, thank you. Okay, is that conclude that part?
Yeah.
Phil, welcome. So we might have to go from what's in the pack, Phil, if that's all right.
Okay, thank you. So I've been asked to come down and deliver a presentation on where we are currently with force management statements that's going forward. So just a quick, I appreciate this time is short, so I'll have a quick run through in relation to what force management statements are. They came out as a recommendation 49 from the Windsor Review in March 2012, and I think in terms of that, the date is significant with regards to how we subsequently have got to look at how they fit into other current force strategic plans, such as police and crime plan, etc. But the force management statements are aimed really at, managed by the HMIC, directed to the Chief Constable in order to show how we present reliable data in relation to our projected demands on the force in the short, medium and long term. The Force's plans for meeting those demands, including financial plans and the steps it intends to take to improve efficiency and economy, which it will maintain and develop the workforce and other assets that it has, and how we discharge our obligations to the public. Each force management statement should also contain a report with reasons on the Force's performance in relation to the previous year's force management statement and the projections that were made. With regards to that, I think that really looks that there's going to be a national template that's designed that each force will produce annually, and then that will be from presently planned for 18-19 to be public facing in relation to be a published document, and this will include financial plans and demand modelling and capability and capacity.
We're going to stop you there for a second. From your assessment, the majority of the data that we will publish, is that data we already collect, or is there going to be a new requirement for additional information and data that we need? Okay,
so I've got a lot of concerns about this. I'm going to flag it right now, particularly in relation to its relationship with the police and crime plan.
Yeah.
So the force management statements are there to report. They are not a strategic plan. The police and crime plan is the statutory strategic plan. So I would really like for my team to understand what your team is doing, Phil, around this, because I have a lot of concerns on some of the feedback that's come back to me already, that this is going to end up being the strategic plan and that there is going to be some sort of other implementation plan underneath it and it will usurp the police and crime plan. That is not going to happen.
Well, I don't think that is ever the intention, Commissioner. So I think, really, to be honest with you, the police and crime plan, in terms of what's been set out as that 3-year plan, there are some challenges for us, and that's why I said we need to know the date of when these recommendations came out, which was 2012 from the Windsor report. So I think there is, at this moment in time, in terms of the team that I run, There is nothing taking place in relation to the force management statements. The pilot...
But Helen Reid is doing a complete assessment at the moment, which was my understanding that was going to inform the force management statements. Now, that assessment should not be informing the force management statements, it should be informing the police and crime plan, and then the police and crime plan comes first, and the force management statement comes after the police and crime plan.
Okay. Yeah, I'm not sure we've got that information from
Right.
Commissioner. We are. The force management statements are in pilot form with HMIC. There are several forces that are doing a pilot scheme. Each force is allocated 2 elements of the 6 stages of a force management statement to design that. They are behind on that. Nobody has started that. There's no guidance been issued by HMIC at this time. We need to wait and see what those pilot forces are undertaking as to what those documents look like. We are not planning, there is no plan for us, and we have not started writing a force management statement because we don't know what they look like.
Right, okay. So we are going to be doing a process around refreshing the police and crime plan at the moment. That concerns me. Firstly, I don't think that Sir Thomas Windsor should be essentially providing a de facto methodology for PCCs to scrutinise their forces, which I think this does. So I have an issue in principle with the force management statement, but we are where we are with it. PCCs have fed back their concerns to Sir Tom, and he responded by issuing some further clarity back in 2015 around what these force management statements are there to do. So I think we need to be really clear that we are looking at what he said in 2015 and not what he set out originally in 2012.
That's right, that's what this presentation is about. It takes the latest guidance.
Yeah.
But the trouble is, the plan is for us to receive additional guidance by December of this year. But that was with the pilot forces starting in June of this year and having done each 2 elements of the 6 stages of the force management statements. Nobody's been given any guidance from HMIC. Nobody's started writing the pilot stages yet. So at this moment in time, we just do not know what they look like.
Right. So can I say then that we put this on hold until we have that information?
But Commissioner, we haven't started anything.
I'm not sure, but I want to be clear where this is coming from, because we haven't started a process that so somehow there is some communication issue that I don't understand here, because the force is organised behind the police and crime plan. That's what that's what you hold me or Mr. Jones to account for in relation to delivery of that. The HMIC, when they eventually come out with a document, then we'll have a discussion separately around that document and what that actually means. I don't know who's briefing in relation to what Helen Reid is doing. She's doing a lot of work around various aspects, but
it links in with the JSIA.
Yeah.
She's doing a full strategic intelligence assessment, Commissioner, but that is not to write a force management statement. So there's no further tasking from that.
So that's part of the JSIA process.
Yeah, that's Helen. Yeah, Helen is doing a full strategic intelligence assessment as part of the JSIA element to it. We have not been tasked with writing a force management statement.
Okay, so in which case then, the last time that we developed the police and crime plan, Helen's work around the JSIA was material to where we ended up with that police and crime plan.
That's right.
Yeah. So I suppose this has sort of come out of the blue, and for me it's too early doors for us really to be considering the force management statement. I want to get the refresh of the police and crime plan underway using Helen's JSIA analysis, which we talked about earlier on. And then once we've done that, I think that can inform the force management statement.
Yeah,
you see what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. The force management statement as the current timetable stands with HMIC for us is due in March of May of next year. But that was with the pilot starting on time. The pilot has not started, so that may be moved.
Could I be clear then? The process will be, and I think the benefit so far has been to clear, hopefully clear any misunderstanding in relation to what we're doing. The process will be to understand and support the JSIA, which supports the plan, which you will then you will hold the Chief Constable to account for delivery of, and then when we get to a point where we have some more understanding around this structure, we'll have a discussion around what that actually means.
Yeah, so, yes, exactly. So what we need to do is be clear around what our process is around refreshing the police and crime plan. Because we're not clear on that at the moment. Yeah. And so what I don't want is the force management statement coming in a gap and suddenly becoming a strategic document. It's a reporting document, it's not a strategic document.
Yeah, and I think our commitment is as soon as we have any indication from HMRC, and we meet every week or every second week, we'll have that discussion about so when the pilot forces eventually get to a point where they've done some piloting, we'll actually get to what we'll actually say this is what's come about, and we'll have a discussion about where that leaves us in any actual form. But it still won't take precedence or govern the police and crime plan and the accountability is the key document that we work to.
Exactly.
Yeah, I don't think there's. I'm no doubt that that's the position.
Right, good.
Just clarity, if you don't mind, though, Phil, is there any work which we're expected to do? Is the direction that's coming from the Commissioner, does that stop us doing anything that requires it?
At the moment, I don't know, sir, because we're waiting for guidance to go to the pilot forces. So, but the concern I would have in terms of that is, if we are required to produce a force management statement by May of next year, at which we will be held to account for within the Peel inspections, then it's.
Okay, so this goes into an overall issue that I've got around HMIC and the focus that we've got on HMIC in the force at the moment, and I am concerned that we've got a lot of focus around HMIC, and I think that we need to just perhaps take a moment to think about that, because we are not working to HMIC. We are here to deliver a service and deliver the police and crime plan. We are inspected by HMIC, and I just get a sense that we are getting a bit too HMIC focused at the moment, and I just want to just take a little view of that. And so this tips into, I suppose, my anxiety around the sort of HMIC focus at the moment. So it's all very well saying we want to go from good to great. That's suddenly becoming a mantra around an HMIC focus as opposed to the focus that we've got around the police and crime plan. And that's the bit I'm seeking to challenge.
Okay, I think as we were, the HMRC doesn't in no way holds you to account. It holds me or the post holder to account in relation to as Chief Constable. But what I would say in relation to that is that clearly there's some aspects. The only good to great bits that we've talked about is trying to actually achieve for vulnerable victims and CSE and the things which are absolutely central to your police and crime plan. Because we said we cannot be across all those areas, but there are some areas which are actually key, which you've driven for a number of years. Yeah. That we're talking about the same thing, but I think the commitment for this meeting, particularly around this subject, is that as soon as we get any clarity around what the request is into the force, then we'll come back to EG. As soon as we get that, we'll have a discussion at EG around what the implications for that are, and we'll get Phil in to to give us the latest hot brief on what the requirements are, and then we should have the discussion with Dave Jones, with yourself, with myself and other people to say what's that balance and what's the issues and what's your concerns that sit within that.
Yeah. Okay.
Can I just mention, Chair, when this came onto the forward planner a few months ago, it was intended to give the board an update in terms of what was intended from a national perspective and what the purpose of force management statements were. I think at the time when it went to the agenda, there wasn't a lot of information around, and so it was intended to provide the board with that more general update. Do you want any further updates to come to this board, or would you prefer it to be discussed in a different forum?
I don't. At this moment in time, the focus needs to be on the police and crime plan and what we do to refresh the police and crime plan, and if then there are some dependencies that fall out of that, then let's have a look at those when they crop up, as and when they crop up, so we can keep an eye on them. But I think the focus needs to be on the police and crime plan and not on this, and it tips into other discussions around the resources we have around you know, the analysis that needs to be done for the police and crime plan and how it links in with things like the JSIA and also anything that our partners are doing around their analysis and all of those type of things. So there's a wider piece of work that needs to be done to look at the sort of sources of data around demand and need that police and crime plan needs to address, along with obviously what the public feel is important as well.
Chair, a view, if you don't mind. I actually think it's a really healthy challenge to say, are we serving the police and crime plan, the public, or are we serving HMIC inspections? Because we all know there's a massive demand placed in North Yorkshire Police, as in other police forces, by the inspection activity of HMIC. There is that ambition within North Yorkshire Police to get better all the time, so there is that mantra, that desire to continually improve. That's definitely there.
That's a good thing.
And that is a good thing. But there's also a regime in place through our corporate risk process as well, whereby recommendations are made to HMIC, and we give them consideration. In some cases, we've said we've heard what HMIC, but we're not going to do that. It's just not in the interest of what we're trying to achieve. So there is a system in place where we don't pay lip service to everything HMIC does. But I do think that your challenge is a really healthy one, because culturally, I think sometimes there is too much
We're just drifting off towards it at the minute, I think.
I think it does require careful consideration, but I don't want to get away from that drive that we want to continually get better.
Yeah.
But I think it's something that I agree. I think we do need to challenge ourselves to whether there's too much drift to serve HMIC rather than serve the public.
Can I just ask, to clarify my own mind, it sounds like this isn't the case. HMIC, given the pilots have not piloted anything, have HMIC acknowledged that, and is there any formal delay in this process here, or is it still May next year, theoretically?
We've got no information at the moment. The calendar stands as we were given, so there's nothing come out of HMIC this time.
Okay, so I think then this is a little bit early doors, isn't it?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. And therein lies my concern, because we're at a point where we need to be considering the police and crime plan and not this. So that's
to give you that reassurance, Commissioner, we haven't started anything on this.
Right, okay. All right. Good. Rumours circulate, Bill.
Okay.
All right. Okay. Good. Thank you. That's fine. Yeah. Generally speaking, we need it like a hole in the head, though, really, don't we?
To be honest with you, that's why I said to you I could use another date when this was placed.
I mean, there's a lot of concern nationally by PCCs about this, so there's a lot of concern around it. All right, thank you.
Twitter. Yeah. Can I just read this one out? It's from Neil Wilby.
You might be busy today.
Signs of Chief Constable Dave Jones on the podcast. Thought he returned to NYP yesterday. Where is he?
It's a straightforward answer. Chief Constable Dave Jones has leave booked. He had leave booked some months ago. This was this week. I'm continuing as acting Chief Constable at the end of the week, and then he returns next Monday.
But he's officially back in post.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. Any other business? Nope.
Just one comment. Yep. Just finish on a very positive note. It'll be reported more formally. I saw the national confidence items that came out yesterday afternoon, and I know it'll be. But actually, for the first time, in the category percentage of respondents who think the local police are doing a good or excellent job, we came first MSF and second nationally. Now, I know it's only one measure, and I accept there are some flaws in some measures, but I'd rather be 1 and 2 in that one than, because actually, when you quite rightly challenged us, we're here not to do anything for HMRC, we're here to serve the public of North Yorkshire, and that's about how they receive the service as opposed to anything else. So I'm sure that's what they're most bothered about. I just thought it was a positive indicator. It'll be reported more formally in a couple of weeks' time.
Well, that's good news, and also we've seen it gradually increasing over time, so that's great. Fantastic. Thank you. All right. Right, date of next meeting is down as the 23rd of August.
Yes.
Yeah, that's it. Super.